the distinction of being the longest serving member of the Budget Committee in the history of this republic. I agree that he was very deep in his presentation and he has a grasp of the entire process of the supplementary budget. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, I have the following comments to make. Number one, you know, if you want to stabilize the economy.
You on a point of order. There's an honorable member who's raising his hand there. Okay, proceed.
If you want to stabilize the economy, and we've had none other than His Excellency, the President, say that the economy has been stabilized. Mr. Speaker, if you want to stabilize the economy, what are the indicators? It's fiscal consolidation. Now, looking at this supplementary budget, because we can only know that the government has succeeded in consolidating or on fiscal consolidation through budgets. If you look at the supplementary budget that we have, is there fiscal consolidation? Yes. The answer is no. And I will tell you that the fiscal deficit has not significantly decreased. Mr. Speaker, therefore, it is rhetoric. It is the same old story, Mr. Speaker. And for how long will we be lamenting as a house? We started lamenting way even before 2013 of the government cutting cloth not according to its size. That we are overspending as a nation, that we are overspending money that we don't have. And we are continuing. Mr. Speaker, remember, the President said that expenditure is going to be cut by 300 billion in the budget of 2022-2023. Kenyans expected to see a reduction through supplementary budget of 300 billion. The question I want to ask today is, do we have a budget cut of 300 billion? The answer is no. The total budget cut is only coming to about 14 billion. Mr. Speaker, you will be told so many other things about how Article 223 has been used and therefore we could not cut. Therefore, I expect the President to stand again and tell the people of Kenya that it was not possible to reduce the budget with 300 billion. We must hold our leaders to account for what they tell the public. Mr. Speaker, that will be the starting point of accountability. Mr. Speaker, my second point, and many members have talked about Article 223. Article 223, I want to agree with the leader of majority, the leader of minority. I want to agree with the chair of the budget.
Honorable Ichungwa is on a point of order.
Honorable Speaker, you know I have tremendous respect for the Honorable John Mbadi, and he knows statements of facts are preserved in our standing orders. Honorable Speaker, we are debating this report by the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and facts about fiscal consolidation in the budget are contained in this report. If you, Honorable Speaker, if you turn to page 5 of the report, there is a clear indication the Honorable John Mbadi may not have interacted with this report, because the fiscal consolidation is talking about is very well enumerated by the Budget Committee on page 5 of the report, actually clause 18, just to draw his reference to the clause, that the fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP has reduced from 6.2% to 5.7% against the 5.8% agreed on between the government of Kenya and IMF, Honorable Speaker. And indeed, Honorable Speaker, because it is within my knowledge that the IMF's fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP, they had sought to maintain it at 6.2% or 6.5%. What the President did indicate to the country that there will be a cut, an absolute cut of 300 billion shillings. I asked them to allow me to make the statement of fact, because we cannot allow John Mbadi to mislead the country that the President committed to 300 billion budget cut, and it is not there. The 223 items we are talking about is because all those items, close to 300 billion shillings, were paid outside of the budget. Therefore, Honorable John Mbadi, you are an accountant. It is simple arithmetic. If the budget you passed last year had a budget deficit of 860, you have paid over 280 billion shillings outside of the budget. It tells you your deficit had moved to above 1 trillion shillings, irresponsibly done in the wee hours of the last regime. Therefore, the reduction of 300 billion in these books, and the chair of the budget committee is here, he can confirm, it is a fact that this budget has been cut by over 300 billion shillings. Why not for the bad manners of the 223 payments that now John Mbadi wants to belittle and say it is talk? It is not just talk. Figures are speaking here. And therefore, let us not defend the indefensible. Let us not defend theft.
Order,
He cannot, as chair of the Public Accounts Committee, be defending theft and be defending looting.
The Honorable Ichungwa. It is order, honorable members. Honorable members. You all have the right. Order. You can rise on a point of order and say that the Honorable Mbadi is misleading the House and place the facts. And my presumption is you're trying to place the facts, although I'm not an accountant. So can we listen to you? Now that we have listened to you, he has his time. If he has a way of rebutting you and telling the facts you presented are not good enough, then he will say it. So you don't turn these things into no and yes. Yes, proceed, Honorable Mbadi.
Mr. Speaker, you know Honorable Ichungwa is my friend, but he knows very well that when it comes to figures, I'm usually better than him. So, Mr. Speaker, we were promised a budget cut of 300 billion in this financial year. That has not happened in this budget. Imani Ichungwa is talking about Article 223 has already, that the other government spent under Article 223 amounts that cannot now allow them to cut the budget by 300 billion. The report, the same report is reading, is talking of only 130 billion spent under Article 223. The total, both the previous regime and the current regime, including the office of the DP, have spent 130 billion, for heaven's sake, that is not 300 billion shillings. So the question is, even if that is what distorted your pledge and promise that you told the people of Kenya with flowery language of 300 billion, then you should tell us where 170 billion is. You have not succeeded in reducing the budget with 300 billion as you promised Kenyans, and that is why I was saying we must hold leaders to account, starting with the president. The president of the Republic of Kenya promised Kenyans publicly, we are going to cut the budget with 300 billion shillings. Where is the 300 billion shillings in this supplementary budget? Or when are you going to cut the budget with 300 billion? So, Honorable Kimani Ichungwa, you can only mislead other people, not John Mbadi. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the issue of Article 223. I agree entirely and absolutely with the committee and with the majority leader and minority leader that this article is not just abused. This is an article that the people of Kenya allowed the executive to steal using this article. Yes. That is the plain fact. Let us not coach it. Let's not sugarcoat it. The executive has been stealing with this Article 223. And Mr. Speaker, I want to assure Honorable Kimani Ichungwa that my committee has already made a resolution, PAC committee. We are going to audit expenditure under Article 223 for the previous 2 financial years, including the current one. Any person, and this one I'm not going to play politics. People know that when I'm chairing a committee, I don't play politics. We are going to be objective. We are going to be transparent. It is going to be public. Any officer, public officer, who has spent money inappropriately will be held to account. And by the way, this excuse by the controller of budget that there was a gun held on her head, I want to remind you, maybe people have forgotten, or maybe you were not around that time in Parliament. Most of you are not here. In the 10th Parliament, towards the dying stages of the 10th Parliament, not even dying stages, immediately we passed the new constitution. I remember I stood on the floor of the House and challenged that the government cannot spend money on vote on account before Parliament passes appropriation bill. And that was ignored. But the controller of budget then, Agnes Odhiambo, a great lady, refused to approve government expenditure. In fact, the government's programs and services almost ground to a halt. We are to be summoned to come back and pass the appropriations bill. That is the kind of controller of budget we need for this country. Not people who give excuses. Not people who now, when they come to a new regime, they want to please a new regime by scandalizing and blaming the other regime when they have the law behind them. Mr. Speaker, I want to just conclude because now the time is not on my side. There is this talk about subsidies. I have listened carefully to Kenya Kwanza, and you talk about subsidizing production. Well and good. That is what Honorable Oundo was calling supply-driven subsidy. But there is also demand-driven subsidy, which you are scandalizing. But in the process of defining what is production subsidy, you are so limited in your ability that you think fuel subsidy is a consumption subsidy. There is no major factor of production like energy. And one of the sources of energy is petroleum. Another one is electricity. One of your great economic advisors, called David Ndii, told us that you never promised us cheap electricity. Then what did you promise us? You know, you cannot con people even after elections. You can con people during campaigns. But immediately you get power. Please now be truthful. And henceforth, I want to plead with Kenya Kwanza. The time for politics is over. It is the time for delivery. Don't talk about Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga. They are not in government. You are the ones who are in charge of government, and they can hold you to account, whether in the streets of Nairobi, the streets of Bungoma, the streets of Bondo, the streets of Kikuyu. They will hold you to account because that is their duty. And I will hold you to account on the floor of this house. Mr. Speaker, let Kenya Kwanza get to job. Not this political rhetorics of people who are owning shares. All Kenyans own shares in the Republic of Kenya. We all pay taxes. And by the way, the last election almost produced a split election. This country, Azimio, Kenya Kwanza, you like it or not, is 50-50. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.